Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. It's good to see you all. Give me 1 second so I can pull up a different screen. So I know many of you, but I'd like to go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Adria Crutchfield, the Executive Director of the Baltimore Regional Housing Partnership, and I welcome you to tonight's BRHP in conversation with Markita Morris-Louis, Chief Strategy Officer of Compass Working Capital. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Please note that this discussion is being recorded. BRHP is a Baltimore-based nonprofit with the mission of expanding housing choice for families with low incomes who have historically been excluded from housing and opportunities in well-resourced neighborhoods. As the regional administrator of the Baltimore Housing Mobility Program, BRHP couples housing choice vouchers, also known as Section 8, with housing counseling services to support over 4,300 families, primarily with children, in accessing and transitioning successfully to safe, healthy, and economically vibrant communities throughout the Baltimore region. So that's within the Baltimore city, as well as the 5 surrounding counties. We're excited to host you all for this discussion this evening. And before we get started, we'd like to learn a little about you. We're a small group, it looks, so hoping for some intimate dialogue. Could you please type into the chat where you are based? And if it's not clear in how you've identified yourself, tell us what organization you're representing. So I'll give you a moment to do that. Let us know where you're tuning in from and what organization you're representing. Wonderful. I see we have representatives from the ABLE Foundation. Thank you so much for being here. Folks on from the Baltimore County Office of Housing, Harford County Housing Department, who has their own FSS program. Looking forward to hearing a little bit more about that. We have some board members who have joined us, BRHP board members. It's some of Markita's colleagues from Compass. So they're joining us from Boston, wonderful. Some staff from BRHP as well. And we've been joined by Delegate Brooke-Learman's staff. Wonderful, okay. Thank you for letting us know who is with us tonight. So to get a baseline of your familiarity with our topic of discussion, we'd like you to take a moment to answer the poll that should pop up on the screen. How familiar are you with HUD's Family Self Sufficiency Program? So on a scale of 1 to 3, 1 being not familiar at all, or 3 being very familiar. How familiar are you with FSS? Looks like about half the group is familiar, very familiar. And I'd say the other half either not so familiar or moderately familiar. Great. So we hope tonight's discussion will provide you with a thorough understanding of Family Self Sufficiency Program, as well as other asset building programs that are modeled on that program, their impact on families with low incomes, and how they are offering new approaches to addressing poverty. If you have questions throughout the discussion, please use the raise the hand feature if you'd like to ask your question verbally or type your question into the chat. I think it's going to be pretty easy to have a conversation since we're a small group. And we will open it up for audience dialogue as the presentation portion concludes. Before we get into our conversation, we want to provide an introduction to FSS by sharing this video testimony of a Compass Working Capital asset building program graduate who was able to purchase a home she had been renting for 8 years. So Tiffany, are you able to cue the video? Thank you.
yo decidí entrar al programa porque yo vi que sí era algo que en realidad me podía ayudar a mí, que era cumplir mi meta que yo quería. Mi meta que yo quería, que era comprarme mi casa. Tengo 4 nietos y voy a tener y viene uno en camino. En estos años que pasaron, todo lo organizamos aquí en la casa, en la familia. El Thanksgiving, la Navidad y Año Nuevo, todo lo hicimos aquí. Y aquí nos reuníamos todos y la pasábamos bien. Antes de entrar al programa de compas, sí, yo antes me sentía un poco que no estaba como muy preparada, no estaba muy orientada, ni ahorraba, ni tenía mi crédito bien. Desde el 2002 yo he estado recibiendo ayuda del gobierno de la sesión 8, una porque trabajaba poco y vivía sola con mis hijos. Después que entré al programa me orientaron más en mi crédito y en ahorrar. Lo que más me gusta del programa de compa es que los coaches son buenos, sí, ayudan bastante a uno porque ellos te orientan y con la ayuda de ellos uno puede salir más adelante, más camino con cosas que uno quizá no sabe que uno puede hacer y ellos, con ayuda de ellos, uno la puede hacer. Con los coaches, con lo que yo conversaba cuando iba, sí eso me hacían sentir como si yo estuviera en mi casa y me ayudaron bastante en cómo uno poder ahorrar, cómo uno hacer todo, y en realidad uno mismo solo yo me sentía que no podía hacerlo y con ayuda de ellos, sí, ellos me daban como un empujón para que sí las cosas me salieran bien. Mi cosa favorita es poder estar en mi patio, poder sembrar mis flores, que siempre me ha gustado, aunque sea en el verano, pero en realidad todo lo de la casa me gusta, pero esa es mi área favorita, el patio. Sí, yo he sentido que he crecido más de como yo estaba antes, porque he logrado cumplir mi sueño. Me siento muy bien porque he logrado tener mi meta y lo mejor es ser dueña de mi propia casa.
So very moving testimony by, again, a program graduate of the Compass Working Capital Asset Building Program. It's this fostering of wealth and economic mobility that are possible with asset building programs that we want to create with our community at BRHP. And it is the impetus for the creation of our own FSS program, which we will share more about later. Now I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Markita Morris-Louis, to share about the work of Compass Working Capital and the impact of asset building programs. Markita proudly serves as Chief Strategy Officer for Compass Working Capital. As Compass's lead on building a national strategy for scale and impact, Markita also directs Compass's expansion into new markets, oversees its Philadelphia office, builds and executes its plan for engaging technology, and positions Compass as a thought and action leader for connecting financial capability and asset building to broader innovations in poverty alleviation. A proud native of North Philadelphia, raised in subsidized housing, Markita holds degrees from Brown University and New York University School of Law and studied at the University of Natal in Durban, South Africa. Outside of work, Markita can be found hanging out in East Mount Airy, Philadelphia, with her husband and teen sons, at local supermarkets, constantly restocking her fridge, obsessing over the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and taking West African dance classes. Wonderful. So, Markita, welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much, Adria. It's such a pleasure to be part of this conversation, to be in conversation with BRHP. It's an honor. I'm deeply appreciative of this opportunity to share more about the work of Compass Working Capital, which I'm so deeply passionate about. And I hope this is a true conversation. I know you and I are often in deep thought and discussion about a lot of the issues that we'll discuss today. So I'm excited for us to expand that to some of our other stakeholders.
Wonderful. So let's get into it. Tell us a little bit more about Compass Working Capital and your motivation for supporting the work of that organization.
Absolutely. So at Compass, our mission is to provide savings opportunities and asset building opportunities to families with low incomes and low wealth as a pathway for creating more financial stability and greater economic mobility. And so we take an asset development approach to poverty alleviation because we know that assets are a stronger predictor of family stability than income. And actually, it tells a fuller story about those who are experiencing financial challenge in our country. So Compass is a national nonprofit. I'm in Philadelphia, and in my city, it has the unenviable distinction of being the poorest big city in America. So our poverty rate has hovered somewhere between 23 and 25% since about 2000. And every policy wonk, every legislator, every government official or anti-poverty advocate or community organizer in the city can recite that stat. It is ingrained in all of our minds. But what few people know is that our asset poverty rate, right, which is the percentage of people who do not have or can't access 3 months of savings to meet their basic needs in the event of an income disruption or unexpected expense, that rate is 49%. So it's nearly twice the income poverty rate. So at Compass, we're aimed squarely at, and frankly, have fallen in love with a broader or more complete and complex problem of asset poverty. And much of our nation's anti-poverty efforts focus on income supports, but they do very little to help families build assets. And in fact, they often penalize families for building assets by setting limits on the amount of assets a family can hold while they're receiving certain benefits, which has the consequence of forcing families to choose between meeting their immediate needs and then taking steps to support their exit from poverty. And so that's why we do this work, and that's why I'm absolutely passionate about it, given kind of my lived experience growing up in federally subsidized housing and having a family that had to rely on subsidies and benefits in order to make a way.
So you mentioned a stat that I kind of want you to repeat again before I ask you a little bit more about the FSS program. But that stat around, I think you described it as, it's a definition that you use related to being asset poor.
Right, exactly. So
say that again for us.
Absolutely. Not having 3 months of savings or not be able to access at least 3 months of savings to meet your basic needs for a period of meet your basic needs, essentially.
Thank you.
So a lot of, and I'll say that this, like so many other things, this pandemic has laid bare the importance, at least in our minds, of having assets. Talk about a storm. It's been the ultimate storm for families to weather. And the beautiful story is talking to families that we work with who have built assets, who have had, even in the event of a job loss, had access to funds to support them, right, until unemployment kicked in or could otherwise help other family members that were in need.
And so then how does FSS lead to building assets for families?
Absolutely. So
why is it important?
Oh, absolutely. So for those, I know about half are pretty familiar with the program, but I want to break it down for those who are less familiar. FSS stands for Family Self Sufficiency. And the program was born from a simple yet powerful idea that working families can capture rent increases into a savings account. So I asked Tiffany, would you please pull up the slide? I can show you probably better than I can tell you, but I'll walk you through because the visual is always helpful. So families who receive HUD-based housing assistance generally pay 30% of their income towards rent. So as their family's income increases, there's a proportional increase in rent. And although it was designed to keep housing affordable, this structure can discourage families from increasing their income, right? Because they worry about paying more in rent. At the same time, they may lose other benefits that have income limits. And families often tell us that as they take one step forward by earning more, they feel like they take 2 steps back because then they lose those other supplementary benefits, and the value of which is often not made up by the increase in their earnings. So FSS allows families who increase their earned income to generally capture the corresponding rent increase into an escrow savings account that they can accumulate over time. And then they can use those funds to achieve their financial goals, once they graduate from the program, the dollars are unrestricted. So, we see families purchase homes, use it to just establish emergency savings funds. Some choose to move out of subsidized housing, but there's no requirement that they do so. It's not tied to their housing. It has no impact on their housing assistance. They pay for themselves to go to school or send their kids to school. They dream. They get to dream and set goals and work really hard to achieve those goals and actually have the resources to execute on those goals. So FSS was actually designed as a workforce development program initially with the goal of incentivizing families in public housing to increase their earned income. Our work is focused on scaling and reframing the language around FSS so it's seen as a catalyst for accelerating the family's ability to build savings as an asset. The genius of it is that it's an asset building opportunity integrated into the delivery of housing assistance. There's no other anti-poverty program like it. And so there are about 70,000 families enrolled in FSS nationally. 3 out of 4 of the heads of households are Black or Latinx. And of the families we serve, 91% are headed by women and 85% are headed by women of color. So given who we serve and how we serve them, we definitely see a clear through line between our work and efforts to address the racial and gender wealth gaps. Certainly along with other tools like baby bonds and guaranteed income pilots. But until our country responds, from my perspective, to the moral imperative of granting reparations at scale, to redress centuries-old injustice, and until baby bonds and guaranteed income are universally available, FSS is here, and it's what I like to call shovel ready. It's been around for 30 years. It's enjoyed bipartisan support from all administrations and all the different compositions of Congress, from the George H.W. Bush administration up and through Biden. So for all of these reasons, FSS is our chosen channel for disrupting the continued denial of wealth building opportunities for millions of families. And our kind of big vision and goal is that the story you saw of Lydia, one of our program graduates, becomes the norm. That we were able to share millions of stories like hers. Hers should be representative of all of the families you see who are benefiting from subsidized housing, because we certainly see housing as a platform for economic mobility.
You just touched on reparations, and that brought to mind a recent June 2021 Brookings report called Long Shadows, the Black-White Gap in Multi-Generational Poverty. And mostly for the audience, I just want to read a couple of stats in terms of describing the great disparity. So just 1.3% of whites are experiencing what they call third-generation poverty. By comparison, more than 1 in 5 Black Americans, or 21%, are in the third generation of their family to be poor. Black Americans are 16 times more likely to be in the third generation of poverty, defined as the bottom fifth of the income distribution. So that's about $48,000 a year for a family of 4 in today's dollars. Most 30-something Black Americans, 59%, have a grandparent who was poor, compared to just 9% of whites. Blacks also face a much higher risk of downward mobility into poverty. And that report contains a list of other articles for really good reading. So I would, I'm going to drop that into the chat at some point tonight, and I'd encourage you all to look into that. But thank you kind of for describing the demographics of you know, who we are trying to assist very deliberately and intentionally in the absence of, for instance, fuller reparations.
That's right. And in that report, I think I was most struck by the finding that experiencing poverty for 3 generations straight is almost a uniquely Black experience. And anecdotally, I have awareness of that. I am 7, 8 generations deep in this country, fourth or fifth generation removed from slavery. And certainly I can count back of 3 generations of poverty in my family. And frankly, I'm the first generation to truly break the cycle in the cycle of poverty. But what I wonder what that, you know, that report didn't address, and I think there's an opportunity to discuss, is that even when you do, right, move out of poverty, when you have generations that have come before you, you become their insurance plan to some degree, right? And so then whatever resources you amass, they have to be shared up and shared down. So you are, you know, in my experience, I am responsible for not just the generation that comes after me, but I'm responsible to help financially support the generations that come before. So it means that not only did I not get a head start, I'm operating to some extent from a deficit, because whatever I earn or save or assets I build have to be shared across multiple generations. And there were none obviously passed down to me in order to enable me to start my life in a certain way. So I really appreciate that support, that report. And I think, again, as we look at the populations we're serving, we need to be very intentional about calling that out and being very specific. And that's why we talk about addressing the racial and gender wealth gaps, because given the vast majority of the populations that are served that are impacted by those gaps, it'd be remiss of us to not mention it. And then certainly reparations has to be part of the conversation among, you know, all the different tools that should be put forward to start to redress and address these persistent gaps.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. And I appreciate you personalizing those statistics. So I wanted to describe a little bit of our motivation for hosting the conversation, being, as I may have mentioned at the top of the program, because we're currently in the midst of launching our own FSS program for a selection of our families this year. And we thought learning about Markita's model and experiences at Compass would serve as a great reference point, as well as motivation for others here today who are also working in and supporting housing equity and have interest in starting programs of their own, whether those be FSS programs or mobility programs, as well as those who are interested in investing in these efforts. So we know that rental assistance and housing mobility is not enough to create long-term economic mobility for families. It's an important step, but it is not enough. While our program has been very successful in empowering families to transition to opportunity areas, and the research there has shown the benefits that will accrue for the children in these families, we know that many adults in our households remain stagnant with their income growth, and they are in search of ways to grow both their income and their assets. The reality is that we also have over 14,000 households on our program waitlist, and due to federal funding constraints that we can debate a little bit in terms of what Biden's proposing, but due to the current federal funding constraints, we've sought to identify ways to serve more families with young children. So our asset building program, called GAIN, is this intentional strategy to create a pathway for financial, career, homeownership, and educational success for BRHP clients. These successes will lead to more successful exits from the Baltimore Housing Mobility Program and allow us to bring in greater numbers of families with young children by taking the voucher from someone that graduates from the program and serving someone on the wait list. So GAIN is an acronym for Growing Assets and Income, and it is an asset building program modeled after HUD's Family Self Sufficiency program. The focus of our efforts is to help families set and achieve their goals tied to economic resiliency. And I just want to emphasize that it's to help families set and achieve their goals. So we are not setting the goals. We hope to be a very client-driven program in terms of the goals and the outcomes. So by year 2, we expect to increase successful exits or graduations from our program by 25%. And we believe that there will be many other long-term benefits to families, including improved credit scores, growing savings accounts, sound financial knowledge, and the achievement of many individual goals, again, tailored to those families' desires. We will measure our success by capturing the overall successful program withdrawal rate, the withdrawal rate induced through GAIN, and the success rate of increased savings and assets by families in achieving their goals. Next slide, please. So GAIN is a highly customized program built around an incentive model for client success in 4 categories. Those categories are education, career, financial health, and home ownership. And home ownership has been probably the I would say, top goal of so many of our families, at least in terms of anecdotally what we hear from them on a regular basis about wanting to own their own home. We believe that this program will support a pathway towards that. Our 3 program components include incentives for achieving milestones, client support services, as well as staff development. So for instance, building the financial coaching skill set of our counselors to be able to best serve our families, both in the GAIN program and those who are in our general mobility program. The program will formally launch later this year. We will have approximately 200 slots as we start that program, but we do hope to expand it into the future. And the program came, as I just mentioned, from feedback. Thank you, next slide. Received directly from our clients. So year after year, survey after survey, and through interviews, we've heard from our clients that they have goals like homeownership or to build a long-term career, but they say few ways to get from point A to B. And we hope that this program will provide that framework. We also know that the racial wealth gap has continued to plague this country, and there are few mechanisms available, particularly for Black families with low incomes, to build assets and wealth. And we hope that this program will provide the tools for families to begin closing that gap through the building of savings accounts and even through home ownership. So that's a little about our program. We are proud to announce that we recently secured funding from the ABLE Foundation and look forward to continue working with partners across the research, academic, advocacy, and policy spheres with knowledge and expertise on asset building programs to make our program a success. And again, I want to acknowledge both Bob and Terry who have joined us tonight from the ABLE Foundation. Thanks again for being here. So Markita, I'd like to hear more about the impact you've seen with your program and its significance today as we see the increasing racial wealth gap and increased calls for reparations.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, congratulations on the GAIN program. And we definitely see, without a doubt, alignment between FSS's asset building opportunity and mobility programs. I mean, it feels like a natural complement to one another to give folks additional resources to support activities they're already engaging in. And, you know, before I kind of talk about impact, I just love to talk about kind of our vision. You know, I mentioned that there are 70,000 families enrolled in FSS now, but, you know, there's about 2.2 million who could benefit from the program. And there are lots of barriers that prevent, you know, greater and deeper connection to FSS or expansion of the programs to additional eligible families. And, you know, they kind of the awareness, the marketing and outreach that's necessary to make it happen. Of course, resources are a constant issue, but I think, you know, our approach is that we would love to see FSS and the opportunity to build assets just to become normalized and be part of the delivery of subsidized housing, such that families wouldn't have to enroll. They wouldn't have to become aware. And we think mobility is a terrific place where this kind of thing could live, where the account is established just from, you know, from the moment someone receives a voucher or when they move into housing. And that it's defaulted, and families will have the opportunity to opt out if they were not interested. But similar to the way, you know, we encourage and incentivize workers to participate in retirement plans and 401ks, they're defaulted into those programs, and it's increased the participation and savings rate significantly. And so there's an opportunity to do the same with FSS. And we would, again, love the pairing with FSS and mobility. And so love to see that you're, you know, that you've taken great steps and strides to bring an FSS concept into your work, and can't wait to see what happens with it in the future.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Also very excited.
Yeah. But so in terms of the impact, I mean, we measure a number of different outcomes related to our work. Some are very specific to FSS, including increases in earned income and accumulated escrow. Others are determinants of financial well-being, like reduction of debt, increases in credit score, establishing credit and credit scores, on-time bill payment, other kind of determinants of financial security and positive financial practices. But all of these things together have a significant impact on a household's abilities to successfully navigate our complex economy. And, we take great pains to kind of learn and study and understand the efficacy of our programs. In 2017, we published a third-party quasi-experimental impact evaluation of our programs that we were operating on behalf of 2 Massachusetts housing authorities. And that study found that participants earned more on average and received less in cash welfare payments than their matched peers. They also improved their credit scores and reduced their debt, exceeding benchmarks in both areas. And then we also see families saving money outside of the escrow. And so they're building an independent savings habit that provides them with short-term access to cash and a liquid asset. And we, use the threshold of $400 in savings, kind of reflecting on the Federal Reserve and other studies that demonstrated that, significant 40% of Americans didn't have $400 of savings in an emergency. So that's something we also measure. And like I mentioned before, we see families purchase homes and establish their own emergency savings funds and use their dollars to achieve their dreams. That evaluation also included an interim cost benefit analysis, which found that the Compass program participants gained more than $10,000 in increased income over a 5-year period as a result of participation in the program, and at a net cost to the government and Compass of $276 per participant. So we'll be releasing a report on the results of an extension of that study, both over a longer period of time from the partners from our 2017 report. And it also includes a third Massachusetts-based partner that shows that those early outcomes still hold and demonstrates generally strong and statistically significant results. So we're super excited about that. We're also in the process of expanding the study to our partnership with the Philadelphia Housing Authority, which we hope to start next year. And then we are also further expanding that study and evaluation to work that we do in the multifamily space. So we provide and operate FSS programs, both on behalf of public housing authorities and more recently to the multifamily market. And we're excited about that because that will be the first quasi-experimental study published about FSS operations within the multifamily side.
You all are doing great work.
We're busy.
You're busy and it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Right. So yeah, I think we're going to have an opportunity to dig into a little bit more of some of what I just heard around the impacts now with our audience. So we'd like to open it up to the audience to engage in a little bit of a dialogue. And I've seen a couple comments in the chat, and I would invite you to feel free to unmute yourself and maybe feel free to expand on any comment that you may have dropped in the chat while we were talking, or again, pose a question, and we'll do our best to keep this orderly, but I think it'll be pretty easy because we're a small group. So who wants to be first?
To clarify, you have to raise your hand if you want to be unmuted, or you can type in the chat. Okay, let's see. All righty, Pete.
Hi, Pete Symbolic with BRHP. Thank you, Markita, for participating. A question for you is, who do you, when you're starting a program or when you're reaching out to folks proactively in marketing, who do you think is sort of the ideal candidate for an FSS program or an FSS-like program?
Thanks for that question, Pete. I don't know, like I hesitate to use the term ideal because there's an insinuation that folks have to show up in a particular way. Like we also don't use the terms like motivation. It's more just about opportunity. Under the rules of FSS, in order to optimize the escrow, you have to plan, you have to have the ability to work or the intention to work. So that's, we try to use that as a baseline foundational kind of eligibility requirement, because that's what the program truly requires. So there's no ideal from that. I think what we truly care about is that folks are in a space where they experience the sense of respect and dignity. A lot of the families we work with are bumping against and constantly interacting with systems that frankly are dignity stripping. So we want them to have a very different experience when they encounter us. My colleague, Sydney Smith, is on. She's one of our absolutely fantastic professional, high quality financial coaches. So we want our families to just experience the highest degree of professionalism when they engage with us. We want to center their voices, acknowledge that they're the experts in their own lives. And so we're here to guide and support and be what they want. If they want an accountability partner, if they want a cheerleader. But it's also about, for me, like my perspective, my background, I've come from kind of community development and the housing counseling and financial counseling space. And a lot of what we see with the families that, I've seen over the years is that they are, they have an imbalance of information. So there's information being thrown at them from all directions. And they're often plagued by potentially predatory financial services and products. One, I think the important role that a financial coach can serve, that's not so much, kind of letting the family lead, but also ensuring that the family has awareness and access to good, high quality information, in addition to creating a space for families to define their own goals and then define a pathway for achieving those goals. So I hope that answers your question, Pete.
That was very thorough, Markita. Perhaps you could speak a little too, and I would invite your colleague also to raise her hand, and we're happy to unmute her, but could you speak a little bit to the qualifications that you kind of seek in your financial coaches?
Exactly. And then Sydney, please raise your hand. I would love to hear your perspective on this as well. One of the things that's clear, we can teach the financial content. We can teach folks how to, to read a credit report, how to calculate debt to income ratios and things like that. But what you can't teach is compassion. One of our wonderful colleagues, client outreach specialist, LaShonda Watson, who's actually a graduate of our programs, coined the term, you can't spell compassion without compass. And so we have t-shirts that say it. We've so bought into that. It's like the best tagline. But I think that's at the core. Like, we want to look for folks who have a deep sense of empathy and compassion, who recognize the humanity in people. We have a set of core values that we acknowledge and celebrate. And celebrate in open forums with our staff when folks do something that connect with the core values. And among them, like focus on impact, go further together, like folks who want to work towards a common purpose, who are absolutely mission aligned. So in our interview processes and our hiring, we're constantly looking for mission alignment. We defer to and actually lift up and strongly encourage folks who have lived experience of poverty to be active staff members and move up and through the organization. We love to hire program graduates or even current participants. And we have several program graduates working on staff, ranging like in all kinds of roles, from the client outreach specialists to directors, because being able to share their personal experience is so critical. And I think just can be really transformative and uplifting for our clients. Sydney, if you feel free to add any and all to that.
I see that she has raised her hand. So Sydney, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Sydney Smith, a financial coach at Compass. And I definitely just agree with everything Markita said. And just to highlight a few points of what it takes, I guess, to be a financial coach and what it really means to be a good one is, of course, at Compass, being mission aligned is like number one. I think if you really view the mission as number one and can align with that, then that's incredible. And then, of course, having that financial background is really helpful, as I find a lot of us coaches do, but more so being really willing and open, and having a good understanding that we are really in the passenger seat in this partnership with our clients and that they're the drivers. And we're here to provide support, some financial education and literacy, of course, and make some really great referrals too, because we have some wonderful partnerships in our community, but understanding that they know what's best for them and we're just here to help them along that journey. Along with that, I think at Compass, we've been having a conversation surrounding having a really solid sense of humility or working towards that. And I think in every part of our work in terms of policy influence or working directly with clients, being open and honest with the fact that we don't know everything. And so, you know, we're experts in a lot of things, but also we don't know everything. So understanding that allows us to be more open to receiving more information and really being able to listen to our clients. So I think that is super important. So to me, those are like the main things that goes into coaching and being a really good coach.
Thank you so much for that, Sydney. That was excellent.
Really was. Perhaps we could go back to a little bit about measuring success, because I've heard both, you know, and I want you to say it again for us, but you have stated earlier how much you can leverage in terms of the federal dollars towards what is accrued for a family. And at the same time, you have mentioned wanting to instill dignity into programs that provide safety nets. And so how do you approach, you know, measuring success maybe in both directions?
That's a great question. So that, you know, the more qualitative outcomes are, you know, we have a really robust internal evaluation process where our fantastic coaches are constantly collecting data points for us from our clients, much of self-reported, but we also get access to a lot of information through credit reports and pools that don't impact the client's credit scores, credit pools that don't impact the client's credit score. So we can get a lot of data that way around debt, reduction of revolving debt, trade lines. And then clients provide us with information about income and changes in their income. And through relationships with housing providers, we can get that information and confirm it through the recertification process as well. And I think on a qualitative side, we do a lot of work to understand how our clients experience our services, mostly through surveys. We do surveys after every intake appointment, after every appointment. And actually, we've actually been spending some time kind of reevaluating the surveys to make sure we're capturing, like truly capturing useful information. And one of the standards we've been using for the last couple of years is Net Promoter Score, which is an industry standard that a lot of corporations use, where folks are asked whether or not they recommend the service to a friend or family member. And so it sets a kind of a benchmark for kind of what is a good Net Promoter Score, and it's usually 80 or above. So we shoot for 85 or 90 NPS. And then we are constantly asking for other pieces of feedback about the specific coaching experience. But we're also expanding it to see how folks experience Compass as a whole, because we have other services that we deliver and in all the myriad ways that clients connect with us and work with us. We are constantly doing client interviews for all of our services. So for coaching, we also have an online platform called FSS Link, where we provide resources and learning opportunities for folks who are practicing FSS around the country. We're doing interviews there to constantly understand the customer experience. And then we have our absolutely fantastic, amazing client advisory board. With those meetings, like the client advisory board was established to be a voice and a space for clients to share with us our experience. So we have an absolutely amazing representative group of clients who sit on that board. And it's turned into actually so much more. and I'm smiling because it was set up, they're supposed to have like quarterly meetings, and there's pretty, straightforward agenda. We pay them for their time and their service because they're experts. We treat them like consultants. We pay consultants, we're going to pay our clients for their time. And our client advisory board now has become a place where any new product, and I don't think it was necessarily set up this way, but that's what it has evolved into, a place where any new product, service, delivery, tool, mechanism, process, it is a necessary stop before full implementation. Early kind of ideation around new tools or changes in tools, processes, or processes or products go before the client advisory board. And I can rattle off a gazillion examples of things we've changed or developed or nixed as a result of the input of the client advisory board. And I'm personally for me, but also as a leader of this organization, I'm very much about how do we instill and shift power into client space and client voice, frankly, more so than a governing board. I have the personal perspective that has not yet been adopted by my organization, but who knows, that I would love to see our governing board do what's minimally legally required of them from a fiduciary perspective in terms of audit and compliance and in HR, but that our client advisory board would hold the bulk of the power within the organization. And I said we set it up for quarterly meetings, but because there's so much clamor from different parts of the organization to get in front of the cab, as we call it, sometimes they meet on a monthly basis. And we've put policy proposals in front of them. They're telling us about which policy priorities we should establish in our next strategic plan or our next kind of set of operating goals. HUD put out new proposed regs for FSS in the fall. We put them in front of our client advisory board and asked in a way that was relevant and meaningful for their lives, but what positions would you like us to take? And that input was extraordinarily valuable. We have been rolling out a new client engagement app. We're calling it coaching app, but it's really a client engagement app. Prototype goes right in front of the client advisory board, does not become a minimum viable product until we get their feedback and their input on it. So I could go on for days talking about the
That is really good stuff. Really good stuff. We had the opportunity to attend your conference a couple years ago now, and I got to sit in on a workshop or a session, I should say.
And you got to speak
exactly with the client advisory board members. Yeah. And then we have adopted that same kind of practice here at BRHP. So really appreciate that exchange. We have some housing providers on in the group tonight, and I wondered what advice might you have for housing providers who are just starting or contemplating starting an asset building program or an FSS program, or how to make an existing one better.
Yeah, that's great. I wonder how many new FSS programs outside of GAIN are really coming online. Beauty that you can leverage philanthropy, and philanthropy has a wonderful role to play in actually seeding some of this, kind of the growth and expansion of FSS. But for folks who are interested in, improving their program or even understand how people are experiencing it. I would say number one, like how often are you going to the participants to understand how they're experiencing your policies? Are your policies client-centered? Do they set people up for success? Do they push people toward graduation? Not all FSS programs are created equal. Not all policies center the experience of residents. Some policies are punitive. Some policies, are really restrictive. For example, allowing residents and participants to have access to the escrow before they they complete the requirements for graduation can be really important to help them, even achieve their goals, right? Or to adjust to a setback. It can accelerate their ability to achieve their goals through what's called an interim withdrawal or interim disbursement of the escrow funds. But not every program has to permit them, but permitting them can be transformative for some families. And then interestingly enough, we've talked to folks who say, oh, well, we don't want it to be abused. And in our experience, looking back, even over this last year, we see very few families even take advantage of the interim withdrawal opportunity because they say, no, we want that money to stay put. We don't want to touch it until graduation. So there's a lot of assumptions, unfortunately, that happen that cause folks to make poor policy choices. And oftentimes, if they drill down and look at the data, look at what's actually happening, and talk to families about kind of what they need and how they would experience the program, it would cause them to think differently about things. So I would say absolutely start there. And then there are tons of resources out there to help folks build high quality client-centered FSS programs.
Thank you. I see a hand raised. Ms. Giddings, Monisha Giddings, are we able to unmute?
Yes, you can unmute now.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I want to congratulate BRHP because I'm in one of those surrounding counties. And so I have actually had some of your families come to me interested in our program, and I would have to redirect them. So I'm so glad that this program is starting for them and they have the opportunity to join an FSS program. I was actually interested in joining as a member of the Compass group as an FSS coordinator. One of the difficulties I have is that we have a very small program. It's a part-time position, so I just do FSS part-time, and my regular job is the compliance and recertification of all general families on the Section 8 program, in addition to other duties. So it can be difficult to, we've already met our graduation requirements. We had a program since 1997. So we try to offer the benefit to as many families as possible. So for us, it's 30. That's kind of what we're standing at. But it is difficult with all the other things that we do to really service them in a way that they need sometimes and give them some of that one-on-one support. And one of the things that I've found is very difficult to find is individuals who can provide coaching that have an understanding of what it is to build your life coming out of poverty. So a lot of the financial coaching is centered from a middle class idea, and they don't have really a lot of times any concept of what it is to kind of bridge yourself out of poverty. So I was wondering, as a part of the member benefits, can you speak on some of the resources available to FSS programs that you offer to kind of help them? Is it videos or any type of resources that we can give our clients, or a place that they can be sent to access certain resources when we need some help to kind of give them financial coaching that takes into account their specific needs?
Yeah. First, thank you, Monisha, for the work you do. It sounds like you're holding a lot and straddling many activities and wearing lots of different hats within your within your agency or organization. So thank you for showing up here today in light of all of that. I think with your question, there's a couple things. One, so our platform FSS Link is meant to be a support to practitioners like yourself. So there are a number of resources that are available in that site, and I'll happily put it in the chat. And you can sign up for free and establish a membership for free. We do ongoing webinars with different topics. We have a resource library. We're actually we're celebrating our second birthday. We call it the birthday of this platform just this month. And later in the summer, we're kind of re-releasing a refreshed looking platform, and there will be a new membership tier that has a ton more resources, like a scenario library to help FSS coordinators who encounter different situations, have some experienced folks who are experienced FS coordinators that provide some insight into thought about how to handle those different situations. And there's like sample disbursement policies, sample action plans, sample policies and procedures manual, all kinds of supports to help in that regard, just in terms of the program management side. And also there's some resources around financial coaching. I think if you're looking, the difference with our programs, we actually directly provide financial coaching services in partnership with our housing providers. I know most FSS programs, the coordinators literally coordinate services. They identify community-based services. And I think you're right, it can be difficult to find true client-centered coaching, standalone coaching services in different communities. But if you check on FSS Link, we have some links to some places that can offer them. It's about, you have to build those relationships and identify that folks that do the work in the way that you would like your participants to be served. So I'll happily put the information in the chat.
Thank you, Markita. I'm glad that this is serving as a resource for FSS coordinators tonight as well. So again, final call for any other questions from our audience before I take the liberty to ask Markita a final question and close us out. But any other questions, anything you feel like we haven't touched on tonight that you wanted to hear more about, please raise your hand or drop your question into the chat. I'll give you just a minute. Yes, I see our board member Bill Tamburino raising his hand, old-fashioned style. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Can you unmute? There you go.
Thank you, Markita. BRHP has just designed its asset building program GAIN, and it has some elements of the FSS program. My sense is that it has some advantages of avoiding some of the maybe bureaucratic requirements of FSS, and is instead of being focused on making adjustments to rent, it's based on providing incentives for asset building. I would be interested in your feedback if you have any idea what I'm talking about, the design of BRHP's program, on what you think of that design. And I think that's worthy of some conversation, because I would like to see some measurement of your success and maybe BRHP's success in the next couple of years over what works and where we can make improvements.
Oh, Markita, you're muted.
Thank you, Adrienne. Thank you for that question, Bill. I'm excited to see kind of experimentation in this space, and especially the housing providers like MTW agencies that have more license to try different things and to decouple the asset building opportunity from increases in income. I know there are some who do it. The Chicago Housing Authority has a program they call kind of like a point system or point scale. Fairfax County Housing Authority has something similar. So I am definitely all for kind of experimenting and looking at different ways to give families this opportunity without tying it to income, because you also frankly expand potentially outside of BRHP, but you could potentially expand the pool of families that can build assets. But even when there's a head of household that isn't working or doesn't have plans to work, isn't able to work, have plans to work within the graduation period. So I think it's interesting to look at other ways to do it. We've even seen some programs that are just kind of like flatly making the asset account available to families who enroll without requiring that they do anything. It's not tied to any particular activity. And they make financial coaching available, but not necessarily required as participation in the program. So I think it's interesting to see all these models happen, especially in this moment. And this is the time to be bold and to transformative and test out different opportunities. Like I said, our vision is that this becomes defaulted. And so we are definitely pushing that from a policy perspective. And I see that our mutual friend, Barbara Sard, is on the call as well. And we've had conversations with her about what that model might look like. And so we'd love to, obviously we're in conversation, not just in this moment, but long-term with BRHP about how we can continue to lend our experience to support your further development and gain and how you evaluate the efficacy of the work. Thank you, Bill. Hand up, his hand is still up, Tiffany.
I got it. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay. Markita, I just wanted to follow up, and I should have said it initially. I had the opportunity to attend a campus conference, I think it was October of 2019, the before days. And I just wanted to say how impressed I was by not only the content of the conference, but by the dedication and excitement of the people in the room. And I'm sure Compass played a big part in that, but I'm just trying to express how much the people who were beginning to understand some of these ideas were excited and impressed and willing to provide service along these lines. So that was a great experience for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we unfortunately won't be doing a full conference this year. We're going to wait for HUD to release these final regs, and we'll do a day-long summit, but definitely look for us to do our full conference, maybe hybrid, in 2022.
Wonderful. Any more questions from the audience tonight? Even if you perhaps joined a little late, we welcome any questions you might have for Markita, for me, for the group. Again, raise your hand if you'd like us to unmute you, or let us know your question in the chat. All righty, I'm not seeing any additional questions. I think we have covered a ton tonight, very concisely. So Markita, hats off to you. And I think we will, I do want to give you a moment if there's any last comment you'd like to make before I close this out.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to give people time back in their evenings. I just hope that you all kind of, now that you know this work, if this is new to you, find ways in the work that you do in your life to be a champion for asset building, particularly in the context of housing, but certainly as a strategy for poverty alleviation is absolutely critical. And thank you all for your time and attention this evening.
So lots of ways to stay in touch with BRHP. Again, thank you to Markita for joining us tonight. We will continue to host future BRHP in conversation events. If you have suggested guests that we feature, we welcome those ideas to outreach@brhp.org. visit our website, sign up for our newsletter, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. We're everywhere. We provide a lot of good content. So again, thank you so much for spending your evening with us. We will be in touch. Have a good one.